Hey, welcome to God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. I'm excited that you would join us today for another great episode. And to all those listening for the first time, thank you for joining us. I want you to know that your story and what you may be going through, they matter here. And you're not alone. So hey, don't worry about what chapter you're in because God's still writing your story. So sit back with a community that cares about you and hopes that you feel God's love as well as see God's glory in these men's real stories. So today's special guest is a brother who's, along with a few other brothers, we started an unofficial morning meetup. We call it the Coffee Bros, where we sit around and we unpack our week and we talk about different things we're working on or believing for. And of course, we do some work as well. So I'm excited for my brother to come on today and to share what God's done in his life with my audience. So I want to welcome our brother, Sammy Spina, to the episode. What's going on, bro? How you doing?
What's going on, man? Appreciate the introduction. And
yeah,
Coffee Bros. I had to bring my coffee with me today, too, just because we're not going to make it this week. So I had to have coffee with you at some point. So even though it's, 6 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
We're going to have some coffee.
Yeah,
right
for
now,
sure.
so.
Look, nothing wrong with having coffee.
Yeah.
I think it's going to liven us up. My sister always tells me that, like, listen, the last thing you need to do is to work or have podcast episodes at night without having coffee because I can tell. And I'm like, what are you trying to say? And so, of course, we've gotten our coffee. We've gotten our coffee in here, whether it's cold coffee. What are you drinking today?
So I actually stopped drinking caffeine about 5 or 6 months ago. And so I drink decaf coffee. So I have some decaf coffee with me right now. And that's what I've been on a kick with for about that period of time, 5-6 months. So it's my third decaf of the day.
Okay.
I know it's not caffeinating me, but it makes me feel like it. And in my brain, it tricks it a little bit. So...
Okay, so look, I was just about to say, like, wait a minute, how does decaf, I think you'll be the first person I ever ask, how does decaf actually work? Because if it doesn't have caffeine in it, is it just brown water that tricks your brain and has a taste of coffee, but it makes you think that you're actually drinking coffee?
To me, I love warm drinks. So I love hot chocolate. I love the taste of coffee as well. So I do it more so for the taste of coffee, just in the morning, especially a cold morning, just having that little refresher of a hot beverage. And I'm not a huge tea person, but I do love the taste of coffee. So I've stuck with it.
I can dig it. I can dig it. That makes a little bit more sense because I always wonder why, like, when people step away from like caffeine or whatever it may be, like, how does the substitute make up for that? And when I'm thinking like, okay, if there's no caffeine, like, because I don't think I would drink coffee if there was no caffeine. I'm simply drinking it to pick me up. Like the taste I could do without. You could give me, I actually have some bubble gum in my car that literally is like Army Regiment bubble gum that gives you like a caffeine punch. And I use it simply because I need that punch from time to time. But before we even jump into the whole caffeinated beverage and the caffeine thing, I'm going to let you introduce yourself to my audience before we run down this line of caffeinated products.
We can go down the rabbit hole all day. But no, my name's Sammy Spina. And as you mentioned, I appreciate it, Rob. Thanks for having me on to share a little bit about my story. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Started out at a young age in martial arts. And I always talk about that because for me, it's an important part of my story in terms of discipline. And as we get into it, I'll share a little bit more about that. But I got my black belt at a very young age in Taekwondo. I won Pennsylvania State Championship 7 times, the Arnold Schwarzenegger Classic a few times, and even a national title. And transitioned from Taekwondo to boxing as I got older, fought Golden Gloves and competed in different competitions. Didn't really know much about what I wanted to do in life after college and didn't know if I wanted to pursue something in the fighting space or pursue something else. Really just didn't have a relationship with God at that point either in my life at all. And so I was torn and I took a 2-year hiatus, I'll call it, and started some different businesses and did different things. And during that time, I started to question myself in terms of what I wanted to do, but more importantly, what my why was in life. And I discovered during that 2-year gap that my why was to serve others. So that's what made me happy, was serving others. Wow. So cool. Use that, and I'll get into the exact story, but I actually prayed for the first time. And long story short, that prayer led me to go to law school and start the journey of becoming a lawyer with the sole goal of becoming a criminal defense attorney to then move back home and hopefully get my friends that I believed were wrongfully imprisoned out of jail.
Wow.
And so that was going to be my way to serve others in terms of helping them get their lives back and a restart on that plan. God had a completely different journey for me. In my first year of law school, I fell out of being an attorney. I still finished law school. I am an attorney. I don't practice law, but he led me down a path of sports. So I'm a sports agent. I've been doing that for about a decade now, represent players all across the NFL and now in college football with the name, image, and likeness coming around. So it's been a blessing, man. It really is.
Yeah, no, wow. So you gave me so much there to like even start on. Like normally a person gives me like a little blurb and I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'll take that and I'll run with it, because my first thought was like starting from your initial idea or desire to like create discipline in your life, but then getting to your why in life. But I'm always curious when a person tells me that they started their life off, or their life started off with building discipline. What was it that actually like pushed you in that direction? Because as kids, understand that I'm still trying to teach my kids discipline. I can teach them a lot of things. I can try to create an atmosphere of like wanting them to be the best humans they can be. But I recognize that a lot of it all starts with discipline. And so sometimes when I tap into people's stories, I'm like, okay, what made them start off with discipline? Why discipline? Were they bullied? And is that so? I'm always curious, like, what was it that pushed you into that area?
For me, it was more so just my family. We grew up in a blue collar city, right? It's Pittsburgh. My dad worked in a factory. My mom worked multiple jobs. My dad worked multiple jobs. So growing up, sports were a huge aspect of my life and my sister's. And so at a very young age, I started in martial arts at 3 years old. And my mom's brother, my uncle, he is a 5th degree black belt and has his own gym now back in the Pittsburgh area. And he started me really pushing me at a young age. So when I started going, I looked up to him. Looked up to my uncle, and I saw what he was doing, and I saw how he was progressing, and it made me want to be better each day. So when I started at that age, I started to realize, hey, I'm actually pretty decent at this thing too, because I started it so young and didn't even realize the discipline I was forming, but the discipline was being built in me without me even knowing, because I started so young, I didn't know anything different.
Wow.
So I never had the chance to really stray away from that, because it was being built in me so early on that it became a fundamental building block of who I am today.
That's crazy. Okay, so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, like, normally when it comes to like kids, and I'm thinking about my own kids, when I started them into like self-defense class, I would say I gave it about 3 weeks and they were ready to go. Like, I'm done. I didn't know people were going to hit me. Like, what part of this? I thought that I was going to come in here and crack a couple boards and stuff like that. And so to them, it was almost like that was the push away of like, I was coming because of how you sold it to me. And in your case, you're telling me, well, I was looking up to somebody and the discipline they had already. And so I wanted the same thing that person had. From just building that discipline, what did that then open the doors for? Like, as far as like, I know you didn't just jump directly into like your why, but like where did that take you as far as like a young man?
Took me to just different levels in general, because due to that discipline, I wanted to be the very best that I could be. And so my uncle started introducing me to other forms of fighting. And that's when the UFC was really just getting started as I was getting a little bit older.
Oh, wow.
Right about when I was maybe 12, 11 years old, there was like UFC 1, and it wasn't really like what it is today, but it was starting to be mixed martial arts and people fighting without really gloves and no weight classes and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a guy, I remember he was in the WWF at the time, which is now the WWE, named Ken Shamrock. And he was also a mixed martial arts fighter. And I just remember he had like a 12-pack, not a 6-pack, like a 12-pack. And I told my uncle, and I asked him, I said, how did Ken get to that physique? That's who I want to be like. I want to fight like Ken Shamrock. So I want to have where I get kicked in the stomach, punched in the gut. It doesn't faze me at all because I have a brick wall. And so my uncle told me that Ken did 2,000 sit-ups a day. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I believed my uncle.
Right.
So what I did was every single morning before I went on the school bus, I did 1,000 crunches. I went to school, came home, I did another 1,000 before I went to bed. So I was doing 2,000 sit-ups a day. And that became part of my routine because I wanted to attain that goal.
Right.
So for me, I guess at a very young age, I always looked at, okay, who's the best that I can see right now?
Right.
What do I got to do to be on their level? I don't care how much older they are than me. I don't care how much bigger they are than me, because
right.
I've always felt that like God had called me to be at that level too. Like they weren't better or worse than me, and I'm not better or worse than them. If they can do it, what's stopping me from doing it? The only thing that's stopping me is the discipline and the work that I need to put in. So if they can do 2,000 sit-ups a day and I have the ability to do it too, the only thing stopping me from doing it is me.
In your upbringing with the foundation you had, do you feel like everything carried over into like as you started to like progress in life, like everything was kind of like a building block?
I do 100%, because without going through some of the things I did early on, there's no chance I would be where I'm at today. Not even a minuscule of hope in that regard. And I think oftentimes we go through these struggles of life, and I had a lot of them early on, and I even had one when I lost my father. And I talk a lot about my father's passing and the battle he had with cancer, because each part of my life that led up to that point helped me to get through his battle, right? Because up until that point, I didn't really know who God was. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus at all. And I mentioned in my intro that the first time I prayed is what led me to law school. That's what kind of opened the door for even this little bit of hope for me. Because as a kid, we went to church, right?
Did the thing, check it off, right.
And and I say that very loosely because we went once in a blue moon. You know, we were that family that had sports every weekend. So every Sunday there was a game and different things. And you know,
were there for Easter and
always,
Christmas.
Yeah, I was there for the holidays.
Right.
But you can always find an excuse.
Yeah.
And like I did Sunday school, right, where I would go periodically to Sunday school.
Right.
And it just never really was consistent. So many things in our life were consistent, but that.
Ooh,
so
wow.
we had, you know, we're consistently going to school. We're consistently going to sports. We're consistently doing stuff as a family. We just weren't consistently going to church or seeking after the Lord.
So then what in turn does that signify to you? Like, what did that signify to you at that age where you recognize there was consistency across the board, but in these areas? Like, what did that tell you?
I didn't realize it at a young age. I never realized it. And I think for me, like these conversations are important because I always say this to my wife: you don't know what you don't know. And at that time, I didn't know what I was missing out on because all I knew was what we were doing.
Right.
So to me, I didn't really know people that, you know, went to church consistently. I didn't really see that growing up. So I didn't know what that looked like.
Yeah, okay.
And, you know, it was easy just to make an excuse.
Right.
Because I never saw that before.
For sure.
But then, you know, when you start to learn the power of prayer, it changes everything. And
you telling.
And I'll share one story on that. And this was my first prayer, right? And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything. And this was right after that little hiatus when I was in that little gap between college and law school. And I remember I was sitting at my apartment in Pittsburgh, and I just said, God, everyone keeps telling me I need to be a lawyer. If that's really what you have planned for me, just give me a sign. And during that time period, I started, along with some other people, the Western Pennsylvania Prescription Drug Abuse Summit. And so we would travel around to different high schools and middle schools in Western PA, and we would educate them on the dangers of the prescription drug abuse and how it would lead to heroin. So we were trying to help others because we had a huge epidemic, and I had a lot of kids from my high school that I knew that overdosed and died. So I was trying to help others avoid that trap and that pitfall. And so my mother was involved with me. We had district attorneys from whatever county we were in. And then also I formed a relationship, oddly enough, with the second in command for the DEA of the United States. And so he would fly back and forth from DC to come speak at some of my events.
Wow.
And phenomenal guy. I haven't talked to him in a bit, but we used to stay in touch for even years afterwards. So long story short, I'm around a bunch of attorneys. They're pushing me to go this direction. I don't know if it's for me. And then I just pray.
Okay, so before you got to the prayer part, what was it in your life that to others they could see that you would be a great attorney? Because I recognize that a lot of times other people can see things in us that we don't see ourselves or don't really see it the way they see it. And so they're like, yo, you'd be a great attorney. And you're like, So where did that come from, or what was it that they were seeing?
It's crazy because my whole life, people would, even at a young age, my neighbor used to always tell my mom, he's either going to be an attorney or a used car salesman. Because for me, I could always just talk to anyone, no matter where you are, no matter where we're at. I could just talk to them no matter what your background is. I had some relatability factor to them for that background. And so I think that's what it was, because even at a young kid, as a young kid, I could hang out with adults, or I could hang out with my friends, or I could hang out with people younger than me. And I just always, I don't know, just
almost like you were a chameleon, where you could blend in and you could talk the talk for whatever setting they put you in.
I could blend in, but I could be myself. I didn't have to try to be someone else blending in. I could blend in as me. I didn't have to try to be them to fit in. I could just be who I was and meet people.
Right.
And so I don't know. I guess that's what they saw that I didn't see.
Okay.
And so they kept pushing that on me for that reason. And I've always been decent at being analytical and solving things and thinking on my feet pretty quickly. So those were things that they had told me that I never realized myself.
Okay. That makes sense. And I like to always point that out, because I recognize it in life. A lot of times people will get pushed by others to do something that they don't see. And I've seen that more granularly as I talk to people, and I'm like, dude, have you ever considered that God may be trying to use you in this space? And it's almost like, why would that be? I don't even see what you're seeing, but I recognize that at some point in my life, somebody saw something that I didn't ever see. And I recognize that God speaks through us to sometimes almost turn a light on in somebody else's life to say, have you ever considered this? Are you even thinking about this? And so I realize how important that is to, when you recognize it, or when others recognize it, you should say something. And even if it's it doesn't benefit me, but if I want to say something, then I feel like I'd be missing out on an opportunity. So I just thought about that even before you got to the part of where you prayed, because I knew there was a lot that happened in between that space.
But to your point, before I get into the prayer, I will say, for me, one of my biggest advocates that speaks life into me is my wife. And she's somebody that sees it in me a lot before I see it myself.
Right.
And she does that a lot. A few years ago, I wrote a book, and before I published it, I sent it to her, before everything, but we weren't married or anything. And
right.
she, she's calling me. She's like, oh, this is going to be, New York Times best, all this stuff, just trying to hype me up and get me excited. I didn't even plan on releasing it. I was like, all right, cool. I wrote it, let's just kind of push it away. She's like, no, you have publishers interested. You have other people interested, do it. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe that's not me. I did it. I wrote it, crossed it off the bucket list type of thing. And she forced me to do it. And it's cool because from that day, I had such an amazing response of people that I've never met in my life that have read it or found it through a friend or was gifted to them through a friend. And a lot of my story was about my father and his battle of cancer, and how, that impacted my life and how I was able to get through it with the help of Christ. And so I had people that really read it for the first time and they had no relationship with God. And now they're curious, and their curiosity started to spark. And now some of those same individuals are going to church regularly. Some of those same individuals are praying regularly. Some of those same individuals have been baptized.
Wow.
And it's just something that I wasn't even going to release, that my wife spoke into me, as you're saying, and spoke that out because she could see more than I could see in myself. And Pastor Stephen talks about it in his book a little bit too, about what others could see, and just how important that is. And I don't know, it's incredible because it really is something that we need to do more of in terms of uplifting others. Yeah, no. And I'm glad you said something about your wife, because I always fall back to the space of what is one of the purposes of a wife to a husband. And I recognize that God gave Adam Eve as a helpmate, not just to be a companion or be there for him, but also, more importantly, to be there to speak life into him. And so, a lot of times people are always looking for the purpose in life, whether you're male or female, you're looking for what your purpose is. And I recognize that the Bible truly is the blueprint to purpose. And I know a lot of people are like, I didn't see it that way. Yeah, but no, if you truly unpack the Bible,
and unpack people's stories, you start to understand not just how they live, but how God wanted us to live and how he designed us to be, as far as like, I show up and I speak life into my husband, but my husband in turn turns around and he speaks life into me because he sees things that I don't see. He's that mirror to me that I won't see it all the time the way he sees it, but when he shows me myself in the mirror, it's like, wow, I didn't look at it that way. Like I was so focused on like other things or this. I never saw it the way you were looking at it from the outside. And so I appreciate you saying that, because I realize how important that is to understand that our wives or our husbands are not just about like, hey, well, look, he's just supposed to provide and protect, or hey, she's just supposed to like cook and take care of the kids. Like, they have a greater purpose, a greater story in our lives. And it's not just to be minimized by what culture says they're supposed to do in our lives. Because yeah, like I love that she did that. I loved it. I love when I see people working alongside somebody who is their biggest cheerleader. And my wife's always saying it, like, I need you to be my biggest cheerleader. Like regardless of what people say, if I can't start off or I can't get that encouragement here, it may never go outside this house. So I'm glad you said that. I had to stop and take a moment just to like bring light to that. So Crystal, you are the MVP. Matter of fact, hold up, wait a minute. You know what? I just thought about that. This is happening right now because of Crystal. So I recognize
like I said, biggest cheerleader.
Yes. Like literally, she reached out to me for you to say, and this is before I knew you. This is before we started the Coffee Bros and all that. She was like, yo, my husband like should totally be on your podcast. And as I got to know you more, I recognize you would have never done that. And most people don't reach out to be on my podcast. God kind of leads me to them. But I recognize that she saw something in you and she knew you had a story that needed to be shared. And so where like Sammy, you know, one thing, if anybody knows you, they know you're very humble. You sit back, you're not going to promote yourself. You're not going to talk about yourself or want to be in the spotlight. But there are other people that recognize that your story needs to be spotlighted. And so I appreciate her doing that, because she didn't have to, but she recognized that this is the right platform for your story. And any wife that can see that, like you said, cheerleader status, like yeah, it's like, come on, they knew it before you knew it. They knew you had something to say before you even knew to say it, or to say, okay, what do you see? Why do you think I would be a good good speaker for that? So I just wanted to share that.
Well, first off, Crystal, I love you. Second off, you know, God uses people for different things, like we talked about. And I think for me in my life, he speaks a lot to my wife for my life. And he uses her to direct me in certain situations that I may not want to do myself. And she does that a lot for me. She really does. And she wants me to share more all the time. And I'm not always that person to do it. But no, she does a tremendous job of cheering me on and pushing me to do stuff that I may not normally do.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
But like, we all have our things where we're like Gideon, and we just want to see if God will actually show up in that moment to like show us it's from him and not just from others.
I think for me, I wasn't questioning God because I didn't have a relationship with God at that point.
Right.
This is my first time that I truly remember praying. So there was no real relationship to even question at that point. It was more so, hey, if this is for me, God, you know, give me a sign. And, you know, what's beautiful is that God knows us so much more than we know ourselves.
Ooh.
So he knows what we need to see or what we need to hear to get us to that point of not just to the point of, hey, yes, this is the direction you need to take, but also like to the point where he says, okay, I showed you this and I showed you it in such an abundance that you have no choice but to turn to me too for support because you couldn't have done that without me.
Ooh, come on now.
So as I do this, as I pray, I wake up the next morning and my prayer was simple. It was just, you know, God, if this is for me, give me a sign. That was my prayer. That was it. Amen. Wake up the next morning. I'm driving on this road that I've driven on 1,000 times. And I'm going home to see my family. Literally drove this road 1,000 times. Get to a red light, and I'm just looking out my window, listening to music, and I see this bright red building that's freshly painted right out my window. and it says Spina Law Firm. And I just start busting out laughing in my car. And I was like, wow, I guess there's my sign.
Wow. And, like wait a minute. Like there was already a building that had your last name, law firm.
No relation to me or anything. And
talk about send a sign. Like,
so I went home that day and I applied to take all of my tests to get into law school and just started the journey. No questions asked. I asked for a sign. I got it. I couldn't question it at that point. Right. Still didn't have the relationship, but I still couldn't question it. There was something there that was undeniable to me. And God knew for me that's what it would take.
Right.
Something undeniable. And so that's really what pushed me to apply and start going to law school.
So, okay. So at this point then, is it fair to say that like your relationship with God was almost like okay, so he hears me and he sends signs. All right. Okay, so there might be something to this whole Christianity God thing, you know. So did that at all make you like kind of like say, all right, I wonder if he'll do it again, or like I don't know. I mean, sometimes it makes people think like, all right, let me see if that works again or how that works, you know. What did that then in turn say to you after you saw that at all, if anything?
God's a seed planter, and for me, he knew that was the perfect seed to plant because it was going to take me on the journey that would lead me to become saved. Without that seed being planted, I never applied to law school. Without ever applying to law school, I never moved to Florida. Without ever moving to Florida, I never go to church, where I started going to church at VU Church.
Right.
Without ever going to VU, I never get baptized. Without ever going to VU, I never meet my wife. Without ever going to Florida, I never start working in sports. I never work with Dan Marino. I never start on this journey. I never start any aspect of my life. It all started from one small prayer of show me a sign.
Come on.
And because of that one little seed that was planted and watered, and then I actually listened because the sign was so big, every single part of my life from there followed that exact same journey.
Come on. Woo! Okay. All right. Yeah. You know, I'm so glad you can, a lot of people don't ever see how the seed went from seed form to like, okay, it sprouted up a whole corn seed. We got a corn stalk out here now. So what happened? I mean, I'm always curious about the in between of like, you go to Florida, you go to law school. What got you going to like VU Church?
So for me, I still wasn't, fully sold, right? Quote unquote.
Right.
And, my first semester of law school, my father, who anybody that knows me growing up, my father was my best friend. Talked to him 6 times a day, every day. And actually, he's made one of the main reasons why I'm working in sports today. When I was young, my dad would always tell me when I would watch a game, instead of doing homework or whatever, he'd say, hey, they don't pay your bills. And now I can say, yes, they do. So it was one of those little things.
Nice.
And so my first semester of law school, I get a call, and I'll never forget this phone call. Is my mom bawling her eyes out. And my mom's such a strong woman. She's incredible. I mean, she started out as a company as a secretary, and she's now the CEO of that same company. Talk about resiliency. Like, she is the definition of it. And never heard her cry before. And she calls me bawling her eyes out. And I didn't know what to expect. And she said, hey, are you somewhere you can sit down? And so I sat down, and she proceeds to tell me that my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and had about 2 weeks to live. And here I am, first time ever living, far away from my family. And I said, well, what do I do? She said, get on the next flight home. He's having surgery in the morning, major surgery in the morning. So I do that. I get on a flight, and here's how incredible, God does different things. So he had colon cancer that was also in his liver as well. So he had liver and colon. Their plan was to perform a major surgery the next morning and remove both a big chunk of his liver and his colon to get the cancer out. And the surgeon was actually a family friend who coached me in soccer when I was like 6 years old.
Wow.
And so because of the relationship to my family, he was really thinking about the surgery the night before. And he won't say this, but I will. God spoke to him that night and gave him a vision to not perform both procedures, but to just do the colon, leave the liver. We'll do it again when a specialist is in town to do the liver. separately. Because of that change, all within a couple hour span, that extended my dad's life 2.5 years from 2 weeks. Sheesh. And that's what the doctors had told us. And I don't know the medical reasons why, and truthfully, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because that extended so many memories that I got to share with him. So when I came back to Florida, rewind, when I got that call, I was with a good friend of mine named Tanner Lakey, and Tanner is one of the originals at VU. Like, he went there when P. Rich started the church and helped kind of launch in some sort of facet. But Tanner sat with me. And remember, we're all new to law school because it's our first semester, so it's not like he's my best friend for 30 years at that point.
Right.
He's knew me maybe for a couple months. And he just sat with me, and he's like, hey, man, look, I don't know how you're feeling, but I could pray for you. And he drove me home that day back to my apartment, and he actually stayed over on my couch and just sat there with me, just try to be a distraction, try to be a friend. And
okay, so hold on real quick. I gotta as just these little moments where I'm just like, I recognize that a lot of times people don't really know how to hold space for people, and whether it be in the church, whether it be outside of the church, no matter what the situation is, I recognize that some people just have this thing where they recognize that I don't have a lot of the right words. I don't know what to say in a situation, but what I do know is that I can be there for you by simply making space for you just to sit here. And if you want to talk about anything, I'm here. But if not, I'm here. Like, we don't have to make it awkward, but I recognize how important that is when people are going through things, because a lot of times, especially when people are dying, passing away, or already passed away, you want to say the right thing. Like, man, my condolences, really, really here, let me know what I can do for the family. And a lot of times people just need, they just need what Tanner did. They just need somebody just to like sit there in that space with them and just give them space to, like, if they want to talk about something, cool. If they want to cry, that's cool too. If they want to share memory, that like you got the space to do whatever, but I'm here for you. And so I noticed that doesn't get pinpointed a lot. Like, a lot of people don't show like how important that is. It's almost like it gets overlooked. And I don't, I don't know if that's something Tanner did all the time, but I recognize that God will sometimes create a space in our hearts to say, this person doesn't need anything from me, but just to be there right now. So I just want to call that out, just because I realize how important that is in people's lives when they're going through something. It could be a breakup, it could be a death, whatever. Sometimes people need their friends to come alongside them and just like be there, like just make the space to be there. That right there is like so powerful. And
that is who Tanner is. That's how he is to this day, not just for me, but for so many other people. And because of who he was that day, and seeing that peace in him, it really sparked my curiosity to attend church. And Tanner had invited me before, I just never went. And when I got back from the surgery and everything went well for my father, when I got back on campus, he invited me again. And I think I told him no. He invited me again. And I said, you know what? Let me just try this thing out. So I went. And about a year later, Tanner was the one that baptized me. Him and another gentleman from our church that were friends. So full circle moment, which was incredible. I started serving. I got plugged in. And what I used to do at VU is on Father's Day, I would always take that day off from work because, on football season, you work on Sundays too because of games.
Right.
And I would take that whole day off so I could spend it with our father and my father at the same time, because after my father had passed. So that was like my little tradition. So I would go for load in and I would stay all the way through the last service at 8:00 at night when we wrapped up.
Wow. That's powerful. That's super cool. Wow. I love how you said our father, because it is our father, all of our father. And it's making the space, or even saying like Father's Day is not just meant for our earthly fathers, but every day is Father's Day when you come into God's presence and spend time with him and make that time for him. I always tell my kids, hey, look, y'all don't have to celebrate me just on Father's Day. You can actually do something or love up on me every day of the year, and I won't expect a lot on Father's Day. We'll just make it a regular day. But I like how you said that. That's really cool. So now you're in church. You've gotten baptized. You're now serving in church. When did the why happen? When did the moment where you're like, what is what is my purpose, or what is my drive? What is my desire, and who am I going to be for others? When did that happen?
I think it was something that was always instilled in me, and I always had it. I just didn't know where it was or what it was. And through my relationship with Christ, you slowly get things brought out of you if you listen.
Yeah.
And my biggest, I guess, downfall was I wouldn't listen. And I think that's something that really changed my life dramatically, even outside of just attending church, because attending church isn't everything, right? Yeah. Attending church should be the bare minimum, but you need to read daily. You need to dive into the word. You need to meditate on the word. You need to listen. You need to pray. And for me, I was doing a whole lot of praying, but not a whole lot of listening.
Come on now.
And that's what was getting me caught up. And so my biggest growths have come when I listened instead of praying. Actually, that's how I met my wife. And I don't know if you know this story.
Okay.
So when we were in Miami, Crystal and I both had other people that we were dating, but we always knew each other. So we were friends for a long time. And actually, when I first met Crystal, she had come to my house for like a little party that I was having with people during just like a weekend or whatever. And she walked in and God spoke to me and said, she is the standard. And I never knew what that meant. Jeez. But I just kind of felt that and took it with me all these years. Fast forward 3 years later, I think it was about 3 years later, I'm praying and, I'm trying to figure out, who my wife is. And that's something that I wanted to take serious. And I think it was Mike Todd that came out with a book, Relationship Goals, and I read that, and I'm like circling stuff. And, you just start to try to apply it to your life. But the one thing I didn't apply, I was doing application, read this, that, but I wasn't listening.
Right.
And so here's where discipline comes back full circle, and this is what's crazy, because I challenged myself to listen. And so for a period of time, I decided I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to be with friends. I'm not going to, play video games or watch TV. I'm going to spend time quietly praying and listening. And if others are going out, great. If it's someone's birthday, I'll go out. But my cutoff point was like 8 p.m. or something like that. It was an early time.
Right.
And so if they're all having fun or whatever you want to call it, cool. I'll say hello, but I'm coming back home. And every morning I made it a point that I needed to wake up and be at the water at the beach. Or I had this little spot I sat at. And anybody in Miami that knew me knew that's where I was every single morning to watch the sunrise. I'd get a cup of coffee and I'd watch the sunrise. And I would just listen to worship music and pray, and then just sit there in silence and just listen. And that was the clearest I had ever heard God's voice, was when I was doing that.
Wow.
That's what led me to my wife. That discipline of doing that repeatedly, not just once, not just twice, repeatedly for months, is what led me to my wife.
Right.
And then once I got to my wife, it wasn't like, oh, I found her. Like, let's get married. It was constant pursuit where I'm inviting her to everything. She's shutting me down. She turned me down probably 30 times. And finally, God gave me this idea, and he was like, hey, invite her to do a devotional with you. And at the end of the devotional, you guys can go on your first date. So I proposed that to Crystal, and she goes, okay, yeah, we'll do a devotional. So I pick a 40-day devotional. And, I didn't pick it. Hold on. God picked the 40-day devotional. Right. I didn't even know they existed. And I sent it to Crystal, and she tells me after the fact that when I sent it, she starts laughing. She's like, there's no way we're going to finish this. I don't have to go out with him. And she didn't want to go out with me anyway. Right. She was trying to pawn me off on her friends. And so we do, and my thought process was, I get to talk to her every day for 40 days straight.
That's how I was thinking now. Like, well played, my guy, well played.
So we do it. And we finish the 40-day devotional. And each day, our relationship is growing. And we're getting closer to each other, but also closer to him with each other, which was cool because it was a study that we got to do together. And it's crazy, man, because this is how we were meant for each other. Another sign, I should say, that we were meant for each other is our 40-day devotional, which ended up being our first date on the same date that Crystal was baptized.
Wait, okay, wait a minute. Like, did you know that was going to happen?
No.
Did you know that
No idea.
At the end of the 40 days she was going to be baptized on that day?
She had been baptized on that day years prior, like 2 years earlier.
Oh, okay.
But that was the anniversary of her baptism, was the day that our 40-day devotional ended, which was also our first date.
Whoa, so literally on y'all's 40th day, y'all had a date planned afterwards.
Correct.
Come on.
Which was also the anniversary of her baptism.
Come on, man. Look, man, you dropping all kind of gems on this episode. Like listen, what he's basically saying is if you can line it up perfectly for your woman's baptism, like you might just like blow her mind and have her like, okay, maybe this was meant to be. Yeah. But it wasn't
me that planned it. One, I never knew.
Very true.
One, I never knew what day she was baptized on. So I never knew that date.
Right.
Two, I didn't know a 40-day devotional even existed.
Yeah.
And three, I just kind of was going with it, man. That was like I said, I was listening. That was the point of my life where I was really, really listening. And it,
what was the devotional called? Like walking into the wilderness or something? I mean, like 40-day devotional. I mean, it had to have been the devotional that God purposely wrote for like during his 40 days. And like don't worry about bread. We gonna do something else to this day. Like I can only imagine what 40 days of devotion, but I truly believe, like, I love to do it on YouVersion of like finding a great devotional and then sharing it with other friends and all of you do it. And then you can talk about like what it said to you and you're like, whoa, that was really cool. So I'm a big fan of that, but I've never seen a 40-day one. So maybe that one was specifically for you guys and I love it if so.
I'm going to say it was.
Yeah. We'll call it.
Because it was. I mean, even if it wasn't actually written for us,
right,
it was actually written for us.
For sure.
Because it led us to where we are today.
For sure.
Being happily married for 2 years, having a baby, and Shiloh, Ava, Spina, and we're just extremely blessed from all the fruits that God gave us just by listening.
Wow.
And that's the crazy part about it. And I think that's what I want people to take away from that story is that the fruits came. But the fruits came because I did the simplest thing that we have access to.
Yeah.
I let him speak to me.
Yeah.
And then listened and did.
Yeah. Well, let's take it even further back. Like you actually spoke to him, because I think a lot of people downplay that part of like where the seed started, that then you spoke, you learned to listen, and then you let him lead. And I think like just in those steps, like a lot of people are like, yeah, but it's a lot to like follow God. It's a lot to like know where he's taking me and know how to start this relationship. But I think really like you literally just dropped the blueprint of like, you speak to him, you talk to him, you learn to listen to him, then you let him lead.
But I think people get so caught up on the journey that they forget the purpose. And, you said like sometimes people think about it and they're like, well, God, where are you leading me? Where are you leading me? Sometimes you just need to be quiet and let him lead.
Yeah.
And we don't do that. We want to control it.
Okay.
And that happens a lot, man.
Come on now.
And this has had nothing to do with my marriage, but even with my profession. And I shared the story with you before of my client, Paul Butler, that he was a tight end in the NFL, got hurt, had an injury. And the little seeds that God planted led me to getting him an opportunity. And essentially what happened was he got hurt. He was kind of a bubble guy on an NFL roster. And after his injury, he wasn't getting another opportunity. And months prior, I had been introduced to Randy Moss, Hall of Fame wide receiver, played a long time in the NFL and very well respected in the NFL circles and still on TV to this day.
Right.
Randy and I have breakfast. I bring up this client to Randy while at breakfast and just show Randy like a video of him lifting and all this stuff. And that was the seed.
Yeah.
And I don't even know why I showed Randy that video. It's the crazy part. Because we were just literally having a casual breakfast and I pull up this video and I show him. And that little seed that planted, fast forward 3 months or 2 months, whatever it was, I'm sitting in my office and my phone lights up and it's Randy Moss. And I'm like, why in the heck's Randy calling me right now? It's like 3:00 on a Monday. Like, what's going on?
Right.
And he just says, hey, man, how's that tight end doing that you showed me? And I tell him the story about the injury and he's not getting an opportunity right this second. And we're working to try to find one. And Randy goes, you think he'd want to come down to Charlotte? Because he has a house here. You think you want to come down to Charlotte and work out with me for a few days? He said, I'll do it for free. Just have him come down and work out with me. I'm like, what? I'm looking up. I'm like, God, are you playing with me right now? Like,
right.
What's going on? What's going on? So, of course, we accept. And long story short, my client comes down, works out with Randy, and boom, 2 months later, he's on an NFL team again. Or a month later, not even. So it's just crazy how God uses those little things. But had I been so focused on the journey of what I need to do to get him there, what he needs to do to get himself there, I would have missed out on the blessing, which was literally set your phone on the table and let God do the rest. Because he did. And I could have never even thought of that plan, which is crazy. I would have never thought to call Randy and say, hey, Randy, can you do this favor for me? I know I only met you a handful of times. We're not best friends, but can you do this favor? He'd look at me crazy.
Right.
But because God put it on his heart to call me, I had to look at him crazy like, oh my goodness, man, like, thank you so much. Like, this is a huge blessing. And it worked out. And, you know, it carried over to a friendship that we have to this day. So it is amazing.
And you know what? Okay, so I think a lot of people downplay the way God writes our story over the fact that a lot of people have been writing their story for so long that they think that their penmanship is the best. And they believe that there's no way God could write a better story than I've been writing until you hear stories of how he's working in other people's lives. And I have so many stories like that where it's like, I sat back and gave that to God and said, God, I'm going to trust you with this because I recognize that it's almost out of my control. I don't know which direction to turn, but I trust you. And I think just in that trust and the faith that God can do something, it may not look like what we would have done as you just described, but it looks far greater than we could ever do because there's no way we could have put together the spaces and the dots of like, yeah, this is going to happen and then this will happen and then he'll get back. Like there's no way. And I have so many stories like that where it's like, just to be quick on it, I recently was telling a guy that, and it's not even that I go to one chiropractor office. I go to the Joint, shout out to the Joint. It's just not like I'm advertising the Joint.
Sponsorship coming soon.
Yeah, right. But like I was at the Joint and I was talking to the chiropractor that was adjusting me that day. Never met him. And somehow or another we got started talking about the podcast. And, he said, yeah, I'm going to watch it. And, sometimes when I hear people say that, I'm just like, yeah, no, of course. Yeah, sure. Like, yeah, you should check it out. Not thinking anything about it. Next time I come back in there 2 Sundays later and he's like, yeah, I've been looking for you. And I'm like, oh, snap. He's about to give me like a bad review. You could have just done that on the app, dude. You didn't need to look for me to give me a review, okay? And he's like, no, dude, I would love to grab coffee with you. And I'm like, okay, all right. I don't know what this is about, but like, yeah, let's grab coffee. Now, I'm thinking this is just one of those moments where I sit down with another brother and we just share. And I do a lot of that. We just talk about different things. We talk about life. We talk about what's going on in his life. He's sitting there watching me talk to other men and he's like, well, yeah, I want my own episode. I just don't want to be behind camera. Cool, no worries. We're sitting there talking. We're talking about how God's worked in both of our lives, how God continues to work in his life, how he continues to work in his marriage and different things like that. And there was another guy sitting off to the side. He wasn't even at our table. He was off on a sofa somewhere, and he overheard us. Now, I know there's eavesdropping is frowned upon, but there are some moments where people hear things where they can't help but say, I want to be a part of that conversation. And so I happen to look over there at him, and he locks eyes with me. And, when a guy locks eyes with you, you just kind of like give him a head nod and you just kind of like go back to your conversation. I mean, that's what you do. And so we're still talking and he walks over and he's like, dude, listen, I just happen to be eavesdropping on you guys' conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and admit to that. And I would love to take you to coffee. Like, I'd love to go to coffee with you, like take you out for lunch or something like that. And I'm like, okay, it's not weird at all. I'm on a date and I just got another date. I don't know how this works. I remember coming home and telling my wife, like, I'm really attractive these days. I'm getting dates left and right. How about yourself? But but like, what came out of that though? Like what came out of that was that I ended up going to coffee with this guy who I in turn invited him to a men's retreat, which in turn planted a seed in his life. If I hadn't spoken to the chiropractor about my podcast, which in turn would have made him invite me out for coffee, which in turn would have had me meet this guy, which in turn would have had me allow myself to invite him to a men's retreat, all of that wouldn't have happened. And so the next time I had coffee with the chiropractor, I'm like, dude, I don't know what it was that told you should have coffee with me and then made you show up. But know that what God's doing in your life. And then he blew my mind at that table. And he was like, dude, I'm not going to lie to you. I knew that was going to happen. I came even though I didn't want to come, but something told me that it was less about me, but that we were going to meet somebody at the coffee shop that day.
Wow.
Bro, listen to me. I like, and I know people are like, bro, y'all are blowing smoke up. No, I couldn't make this story up if I wanted to, but I just recognize how God works in our lives to do things that are far greater than we could ever do. He writes stories for us. He brings marriages together. He brings forth a generation of children out of us that he's already seen and already planned for. And he just wants to see if we'll continue to allow him to write the story, even though we believe we've seen so much and have so much knowledge of, like, I know how to live life. I see all these people doing it without you. Like I can do this. Like, I've been doing it before you. So why can't I just do it on my own? But it's not that you can't do it on your own. He'll let you. But he knows that if you let him do the work, if you let him do the writing, the story will be way greater than you could ever imagine every time. Like that whole thing of he works it for your good. It's like an understatement. We should put he works it unbelievably well for your good. Because I think good just doesn't cover what he does in our lives.
It doesn't, but you brought up a good point. We have to show up, and that's what you did. And even though you or your friend may not have felt like showing up, showing up was the first step. And I think that's in life right now where a lot of us get it twisted because we pray, but then we sit on our couch. You know, we don't show up. And sometimes the one thing, the simplest thing that we need to do is just be present, just be there. And honestly, that's how I got started in this career too, was through that. When my first year in law school, my first semester, actually, I still didn't know what a sports agent was. And it's funny because if you ask 90% of sports agents right now, they wanted to do it since they were 3 or whatever. You know, they wanted to do it forever.
Right.
I didn't even know it was a job, man. Like where I grew up, you know, really you don't see a lot of success. You really don't. And if you do, it's, you know, you hear the traditional, like, oh, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, but then it kind of gets cut off there.
Right.
There's no like visionaries, you know, there's no real big entrepreneurs that have done X, Y, and Z, like where we came from. Like we don't have a grocery store in my hometown. So there's really not much there.
Okay. So wait a minute, Sammy, like, what were y'all eating? Like,
you have to drive. There's a Walmart like 20 minutes away or 15 minutes away.
Okay, so not in your town.
But not in our town. Our town, we had a Dollar General. That was where you can go get snacks.
Turn up. Yeah.
Yeah. But I say all that because my first year in law school, I just kept showing up. And I didn't know anyone in Miami at the time. I really didn't have any friends in the area. And even my high school was a small high school. I graduated with 98 kids, and our area was small. And it's crazy because, you know, I'm this person in this small high school, but God always made me feel like there was so much more out there, even though I had never seen it. And it's crazy because he put me in a position to be in a career that enables me to travel all over the country to where now, if I land in a state, almost every state in America, I can call someone close enough to go have dinner or go have lunch. Almost anywhere in the country.
Wow.
Whereas a kid, you know, most of my friends never even went to Pittsburgh until they were 19, 20 years old. And that was a 35-minute drive.
Wow.
And so it's really incredible to see how he uses, in a lot of stories, not just my story, but even biblically, he uses a lot of people that seem broken or seem like you're not going to reach that goal. You're not worthy. You come from this area. You're not worthy to get here, or at least that's what we tell ourselves.
Right.
When he sees so much more in us. So when I was in my first semester, I'm trying to meet people and network, and I talk about serving. Before I even knew what serving really was, I knew what it was. And I wanted to give back to people. So I got connected to Jason Taylor, who is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, played for the Miami Dolphins. He had a foundation in South Florida that did a lot of amazing work. So I got connected to his foundation director, a guy named Seth Levitt. And It's funny because I kept asking Seth if he can get Jason to come speak to our law school for free. And now being in the industry, I know that's not how it works. But at the time, I was just ambitious. I'm like, I'm going for it. He's a Hall of Fame. You know, he wasn't a Hall of Famer yet. He hadn't gotten inducted or any of that yet. But at the time, I just, to me, he's a big name. And I want to get him there. And so I'm just trying, and I'm calling Seth almost every single day, just annoying him. And finally, I'm like, you know what? This isn't working. But they have events coming up and stuff. So I asked Seth, hey, how can I get involved? How can I, volunteer and do different things? So he gave me an opportunity to come out and just help out. And so I started going to some of their events and just slowly started helping out. And I'm like, you know what? This is a whole new world. Like you can work with athletes and do stuff in the legal space. And so they shared an office with a guy named Ralph Stringer. And I can't say enough about Ralph. Ever since my father passed, he's essentially been a second father to me. He was one of the first big, prominent black sports agents, like in all of football and all of sports, not just football. And he was the exclusive marketing representative for Dan Marino, a Hall of Fame quarterback that played for the Dolphins.
Right.
And so what I started doing is telling Seth, hey, I know I'm helping you guys out the foundation. They shared an office. Can I just come in every day and just do whatever? So I come in every day and I'm helping them out with whatever they need, social media, website, making calls. But it was cool because it allowed me to create a network in Florida, because now I can call a business owner and say, hey, Jason Taylor's having this event for his foundation, do you want to come? Whatever it may be.
Right.
So I start collecting contacts and I start meeting people and networking. And then also I'm next door to Ralph. So I'm just listening to him talk on the phone and do this stuff and listening to the business deals. So I tell Seth one day, man, I really want to work for Ralph. I want to do this. I want to get into this space. And so I asked Ralph for a job, and he told me no. I asked him again. He told me no. He told me no 6 times. And so Seth and I wrote this letter and gave it to Ralph about me wanting to come work for him. I'll work for free. I'll do whatever, So I'm offering to work for free for him. All this stuff. Tells me no again. Next day, and here's where the discipline and God and the persistence of just having him speak into me that this is for you came in to fruition. And it's funny because rewinding about 3 months earlier, before I had even started working at the foundation and helping out, I was on an airplane and met a guy who told me that he played golf with Dan Marino at Kiowa Island and that they were friends. And in that moment, I felt what I didn't know at the time, which I do know now. The Holy Spirit told me that one day you're going to work with that guy. And
the guy on the plane?
No, that I was going to work with Dan Marino. Because the guy was talking about it. And I remember I got home off the plane, and I think I called my mom at the time, and I said, hey, I'm going to end up working with Marino. And she's like, what? Yeah, because he's a Pittsburgh guy. So everyone knew who he was from back home. And, the next day after Ralph had told me no, I just took all my stuff and moved into his office. And I just started answering the phone. And so he walks in and I'm on the phone. I'm like, hey man, ESPN's on line 3, whatever it was. And from that day on, that was it. That was my role. I was working with him, and I ended up working with him for almost 7 years, and became vice president with him in the company, and worked with him and Marino and Jason Taylor and Zach Tom and all these Hall of Famers and different people in the industry that I would have never gotten introduced to had I just not showed up.
Right.
But to tying it back to your point, I showed up every single day to an unpaid position to get me to where I was. And that's what it took.
Okay, but I'm sure you've seen this already, but I also noticed that there's something in your story that a lot of people don't know how to push past. Yes, showing up is one piece, but how do you push past all the no's? Because I recognize that no played a part in both, in parallel in all your stories, from you consistently pursuing your wife to you consistently pursuing a job. And normally, I was just talking about this recently in an episode, like the only thing that kept me coming back from no's back then in the past used to be liquor. That was the only thing that gave me the courage to push past so many no's, whether it be pride or whether it just be like, hey, look, you know what? I like I said, it would have to be like God, like saying, hey, look, no, the no doesn't mean no. And let's be real. I grew up learning that no means no. It means no. And so you stop at no. So what made you consistently push through no's to show up? Because showing up it helps when people are like, maybe or yes. But how do you show up when no's consistently hit you?
It was that little boy at 3 years old that God was creating through the discipline and foundation of martial arts. Because when you're fighting, you're getting punched in the face. It's easy to throw a punch, not easy to take one. So at a young age, I learned how to take a punch. I learned how to break a fall. I learned how to, get kicked in the gut. I learned all that stuff from a physical act that allowed me to keep pushing through and going through the physical pain that a no never really did any damage to me. And I always tell my wife this as well, and it's something that she's now adopted in her life. And so one of the things that I've always done is I'm very big on breaking things down to the simplest form, because I think as humans, we try to overcomplicate things to make us sound smarter than we really are. In a lot of situations, we just don't need to do that. Some things are just very simple, so keep them simple. And so what I do is any situation that I'm in, whatever it may be, I just ask myself, what's the worst thing that can happen from this? And 9 times out of 10, if you're asking for a promotion, you're asking for a new job, or you're asking for whatever it is in life, 9 times out of 10, the worst thing that can happen is you're in the exact same spot as you were before you asked that question. So what do I have to fear if the only thing that can happen to me is that I elevate or stay stagnant? Why am I scared? Because the worst thing that can happen is I stay in the exact same spot. But the best thing that can happen is that I'm here. And look, the Bible tells us to ask. If we don't ask, we don't receive. And so for me,
you're okay. So you're so right, and I'm sitting over. Okay, so know that question wasn't just for like. I've been sitting with that for a while now, recognizing that no's have a way of scaring me off. No's have a way of playing against the pride that I have that says, "All right, they said no. Like, leave it alone, let it go. No point calling them again. They said no, even if they didn't say anything." I will label that as no for people, so I don't go back to people because I'm scared of like them giving me a blunt no. I'd rather take the quiet no. I'd rather take the given no of like, they said no, they didn't say anything, so it means no. And I personally need to build that in myself of like realizing that sometimes I give people no's that they haven't said yet. Sometimes I am scared to come back and re-ask a person because I don't want to look like, I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to process through that one. Like, how do I feel I would look? I know it plays into my pride, but how do I feel I would look if I keep asking people even after a no, or even if they've said nothing? Like, if they say nothing, how do I come back and ask again? And I think that's still something I'm working on still.
It's tough, man. And I think we're all different. But I think for me personally, I was never really struggling with that. I mean, you saw me. I walked around with a pink laptop for a year. I broke my laptop and I just didn't want to buy a new one. So I used my wife's. And, here I am working in the football industry with all these big grown men, and I'm typing out on a pink laptop. So for me, it was never really about caring what anyone else thought, because I had the approval of the only person I needed the approval from.
Come on now.
And that's my Lord and Savior.
Yeah.
So knowing that I have that approval every single day of my life, I don't need anybody else's approval to justify anything that I do.
But you're okay. So you're talking about like how you look, and I agree with you on that. But I think like how you look to people. You're right, man. It's how you look regardless. Like, okay, like, am I going to be the guy who's just always asking? Even like, I thought I told him no. Like, yeah, well, here I am again. You're going to have to tell me no again. Okay, tell me no again. All right, we're going to have to come back, aren't we? Like, I guess it is how I look to others. That really sums it up of like, how will I look if they told me no or they told me nothing and I come back and ask again? Will I look like the thirsty guy? Will I look like the guy who doesn't know how to take no for an answer? Will I look like I think all of that runs through my head, and it keeps me from asking a lot of times.
Yeah, but it's just getting over that hurdle, and it's repetition, just like anything else. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And whenever you hear a no so much, it doesn't faze you, man. Like I had a situation, In my job, I hear no a heck of a lot more than yes. That's for dang sure. I mean, there's about 900 registered agents out there in the NFL. There's 32 first-round draft picks every year. So do the math. You're going to get told no a heck of a lot more than yes.
Right.
And I had a situation kind of recently where I wanted a player to get traded, and the team didn't want to trade them. And so I asked the team, and I won't say who they were, but I asked the team for a trade, and they told me there's a 0% chance we do that, 0% chance we do something else I asked for, 0% chance I do something else. I kept calling and calling and calling to the point where the general manager threatened to block my phone number. But he kept telling me no. You know what happened? I got him on a new team. But that was because of the persistence. If I would have stopped at the first no, my client would have been dissatisfied. He'd have been in the same spot. He'd have been stuck. I'd be in the same spot. Because I did that, he got put into a new situation, much better situation for his career long term for where he's at. And now he's thriving in the new opportunity that he has. But if I would have just stopped at the no, or stopped at the, hey, if you call me again, I'm going to block you, or hey, you know, there's a 0% chance this happens, nothing else pushes forward.
Yeah, there's levels to this, bro, and you just unlocked the level that I have struggled with for a long time. And it's one thing to, like, I don't care how I look to people. I don't care if I got a pink laptop. I don't care what they think. But there's a whole nother level to, like, I don't care what they think about me as I continue. Because it's easy to say I don't care what they think when I don't have to be around them, or I'm not consistently showing up to as like, I hate these songs like Bugaboo, because every time I think about like doing something again, I'm like, they're gonna call me a bugaboo. And it's like but like you said, I'm already here. Either I can make something happen by going higher, or I can stay here and consistently get a no. But guess what? I'm not going down. I'm staying here, and maybe I will be considered like, yeah, he's the guy who just doesn't take no for an answer. But maybe if I stop telling myself that, maybe I'll stop staying hung up on that.
Well, also for me, it was learning how to pray about it, because the one thing I struggled about was I didn't know how to pray in certain instances. Like, I would just kind of be generalized, and I wouldn't really ask God for help. I would state things, but I wouldn't ask specifically for what I needed. And I remember there was a sermon by Rich Wilkerson, Pastor Rich, and P. Rich said, whenever you pray specifically. Because when you pray specifically, right, God knows how to answer that. And he already knows. He just wants to hear you ask for it. For sure. And when I started doing that, it helped me overcome so many different things, because there were so many times where I just prayed this vague prayer. And I'm just like, God, where are you? You didn't show up. And he's over here just looking at me like, you know what to do. Ask. Just ask. Just like a good father. And it's like for all of us, if you're struggling through something, I can't help you unless you tell me. I can't help you unless you ask. Because I don't know what's going on. Even though he knows what's going on, he's not going to just give you help when it's not warranted. You got to ask for the help. You got to want the help.
Well, the crazy thing about it is it's no different than as being a father now. I mean, like, there's going to come a time where you may know something about your daughter. You may know what she needs. But you can't jump the gun sometimes when you need her to learn the habit of asking for help. You need her to do that. So her just coming and just pouting, it's not going to answer the bill. It's not going to foot the bill of like, I don't know what you're pouting for. I don't know what, even if I do, but I need you to say it. I need you to voice it, because not only is that teaching you how to voice it to me, that's teaching you the importance of voicing it to others, instead of assuming they know what you need, what's going on through your head. And so that's powerful, because I think we all need to learn that voicing our specific prayers, voicing our specific needs to God, yes, he already knows, but he needs to see that you'll come before him and lay that at his feet and say, I need your help with this. This is broken. I can't do anything. It's a surrender of I can't do anything with this. I need your help with this. And without your help, without me being specific, I may just be sitting here like, it's almost like what we do as husbands. Like, she knew what I wanted to eat tonight. She knew what I wanted. But the truth is maybe she done. Maybe she's still sitting there like, I wish he would just tell me. I wish he would just tell me. I wish we would stop playing this game of like assuming I know, as if it's running across like a dashboard across her head, like a scrolling screen. I want potatoes with my steak tonight. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. I need you to express your expectations to me. I need you to express your prayers to me. I need you to let me know as a Heavenly Father what you need from me. So that's good, bro. That's so true.
I think it's praying and also listening. I keep going back to it because that's the constant thing in my life that's changed so much. And one of the things that I learned by listening was changing my perspective. And I think a lot of us get hung up because we're scared. And, my perspective has been what I just shared with you was what's the worst thing that can happen. Right. But even when my father was sick, I had a help me attitude almost, where I'm like, why me? Why my dad? I'm asking all these questions. And I remember vividly writing this in my notebook on my phone. And I'm laying in a hospital room and and it was tough, man, because for those of you that don't know the whole story, I was in law school in Florida. My dad's in Pittsburgh, doing chemo treatments every week, in and out of the hospital for different surgeries. His cancer spread from his colon, liver to his brain. So he's going in all these different procedures. He had 2 brain surgeries and all this different stuff. And it felt so helpless being miles away. My mom and my sister still live in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area, and they were there. I was the distant child,
right.
And for the first time in my life. So my best friend's going through this battle that I just couldn't help him with. And I would fly back home almost every single weekend so I could take my dad to chemo or just be with him and spend time in general, or if there's a procedure, whatever it was. And it was a blessing that someone in my family is a pilot and I was able to get cheaper airfare to be able to do that, which was amazing. But I was also working full time. I was in law school as a student, and I was getting my MBA at night because I graduated law school with my Juris Doctorate and my MBA at the same time. I did 2 degrees. And so my time wasn't really there for much other stuff. So when I'm in the hospital, that was really the most time I had to be quiet and listen, because all you hear is the beeping of the machine and really just silence.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, God, why? Why my dad? Why me? Why are we going through this? And I'll never forget, and this is what I wrote down in my notes. God said, change your perspective. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what does that mean? So I'm just and it just clicked. Instead of saying, why me? Why my dad? Why are you doing this? I should be saying, why not me? Why not my dad? Why aren't, there's so many other questions I should be asking to shift that perspective. And when I learned that, it made everything else so much easier, because then we were able to use his story and our journey to help so many others that were struggling with it, that may not have that relationship with Christ.
Oh, come on.
And now being able to look back and share something that was very difficult for me, and being able to share that with others that are going through that don't have that same foundation, right? That same discipline, that same prayer life, I'm able to now open up with them and share what I went through. And again, similar to my book, a lot of people that I know, I have clients that are getting baptized now. NFL has this stigma around it. I had a client call me about a month ago, and he's like, hey man, guess what I'm doing? I'm like, I don't know, going out to eat with some friends. What is, it's nighttime. He's like, no, I'm driving a Bible study. And I'm starting to see these kind of chain reactions and I just had a conversation with a buddy of mine, Vitor Belfort, going back to fighting. He was a UFC fighter. And he called me the other day and we were talking about this. And he's like, hey man, we need to start something where we just get a bunch of athletes together and share, the real gospel.
Right.
Not just a motivational speech, not just, hey, if you do this, but then you go out on the weekend and live this other life, you come back and repent, you're fine. No. Hey, you need to make real changes. And,
sure.
And so now, he's held me accountable to a lot, Vitor, which is amazing, because seeing his discipline still to this day has been something that I look to now when I live my life, because it's not just saying you're going to do something and then doing something else, or saying you should live this way and living another way.
Right.
What he says, he does.
Yeah.
And it's challenged me to be a better man. And if I say I'm going to do it, or if I want someone else to do it, I should live it out and let them do it through my actions.
Yeah, no, that's good. And as I sit here and listen to you talk, I think about the mindset that I was recently sitting on, of God will give you everything you need for the season that you're in. And just listening to your whole story, I recognize how like there were just moments where God had already put certain things in your life, had already had the people there, whether it be for the flights to see your dad, whether it be to encourage you on your way, to whether it be to give you direction and point you in the direction of where you're going. Like he gave you everything you need, the people you need, the resources you need for the season you are in. And I think that's a mindset that Stephen Furtick had, you know, it was a big mindset that he put in his book, but I think it's so overlooked.
It is. And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier and how you struggle with asking for stuff and asking for things. And a lot of times, every time actually, the season that we're in, we have every resource we need. We just don't always use those resources. Ooh. Because we're afraid to ask, or we're afraid of reject, or whatever it may be. We don't want to come off a certain way. And I'll share this other story just because it's one of the most memorable things in my life. My dad was a diehard Pittsburgh Penguins fan, hockey. And as he was getting close to his time to return home, we knew he was progressing down that journey. And so I wanted to do something special for him when I came home for Christmas break. And so I called Dan Marino, and I knew he had a friendship with Mario Lemieux, who's one of the owners of the Penguins and also a Hall of Fame hockey player, probably the most famous in Penguin history. And I was like, hey, man, look, can you introduce me to Mario? I want to take my dad to meet him at a game, just like stop by, say hi, whatever. And so Danny made a couple calls, and Mario was out of town, but Pierre LaRouche was there, who was one of Mario's best friends and also somehow involved with the ownership. I don't know exactly his role. And he was, before Mario, he was Mario. Like, he was the guy on the team. So my dad knew who he was. I didn't know a ton about him. So I get on the phone with Pierre, and I'm like, hey, man, you know, can you introduce my dad to Mario? Just something quick, whatever. And Pierre goes, hey, man, you know, he's actually out of town. I'll do you one better, though. Come to the game. I'm going to give you and your dad tickets to the owner suite. Why don't y'all just sit with us in the owner suite? And so I told him, you know, obviously the story of everything. And so we get there, and my dad has no idea. He thinks we're just going to a regular hockey game, you know, sitting wherever. Right. And so I'm like, hey, man, you got to come with me. We can't go that way. We have to go this way. My dad's looking at me like I'm crazy. He's like, dude, that's the suite entrance. What are you doing? Like, we're not going up there. And so we go, and I'm like, hey, you know, just a heads up, here's what we're doing. He freaked out. And I share this because it's the power of asking. Me, I hate asking for favors. Like, I just do not like doing it. I don't know. It's just something that I've never been good at. I'm trying to be better at for different aspects, because God has put people for a reason. Right. And things for a reason in your life. So I'm trying to become better at that. And I know that's one of my faults. But in that instance, God gave me the courage to ask. And so because I asked, I was able to share the most memorable time with my dad that I'll remember forever. And we sat in the owner suite, and Pierre brought all, like, the general manager over, all the executives over to meet my dad, the arena announcers, etc. The Penguins win. Pierre takes us down to the locker room to celebrate with the team after the game. So the Penguins have this player named Sidney Crosby. He's like the face of the NHL. He had Sidney waiting down there. I didn't even know. And Sid gave my dad a tour of the locker room, just one-on-one. Just showed him around, introduced him to some of the other players. So we have, you know, I have pictures on my phone of my dad and I with Sid, or us on the ice and in the locker room. So all this stuff. And this is, you know, those things I'll remember forever. Fast forward, Pierre, I didn't know this. His wife was actually sick with cancer too. So there was a relatability thing there that him and I were sharing without even knowing, but God knew. And that enabled us to form our own friendship from everything else. And I'll be forever grateful, and I say this all the time, I'll be forever grateful for Pierre and the Penguins, because they gave me, honestly, one of the best and most memorable experiences with my father that I'll never forget.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
But that's the power of asking.
Shout out them. Yeah. No. Nothing else. You're going to encourage me to, like, ask. Like, I get the message loud and clear, and I didn't know that this episode was going to be like and sometimes they are. They kind of like encourage me or kind of give me that nudge. But this one is definitely like screaming, like, you can't be scared to ask. Not in a season where God is wanting to do things in my life, but sometimes it's at the other end of an ask that I'm just like, man, I appreciate this, brother. This has been an awesome time, man. I hear you loud and clear, and I recognize how God speaks through us, not only for the people who are listening, but sometimes that message is either for ourselves or for the person sitting across from us. And I know we do this regularly, but today it was loud and clear, and I hear you, God, and I hope others are listening too, because I recognize that just everything from starting the prayer life, listening, and then following, and there's going to be ask in there. Those are great, like, key points that I've taken away from just this conversation of recognizing that it's not just to sit back and like, I'll take care of everything. God's asking us to do things. He's asking us for moments, intimate moments where he can speak to us. He's asking us to follow him, but he's also asking us to get out of our ways, to ask, to pray for others, and to serve, as you said about your why, serve others in the midst of it all while you're waiting on him. Love on others. Create a why in your life to understand how it's bigger than you. A lot of times our whys are because I want it, because I said so, because I like that. But it's less about like, because I want to help them, because I desire to see something outside of me create a moment of happiness for somebody else and their father. And I think when your why is outside of your own story, it allows your story to be so much more rich. So I appreciate you sharing that with us today, man. This has been awesome, man.
Thank you, man. And it's crazy because you talk about ask, and if you go back to the beginning of my story, remember, everything started by me asking through prayer.
Yeah.
That's where my entire story started, by me asking God through prayer, which I didn't know how to do. So if anyone takes, like, the one thing I hope from this episode is, if someone's watching it and they don't know how to pray, or they don't have a relationship with God, and they hear this story and see, I was that broken person that didn't know how to pray. I didn't know where I was going after college. And I literally prayed before I knew how to pray, asking God one simple question to give me a sign. And then that one prayer literally changed the trajectory of every single aspect of my life.
Wow. That's heavy. That's heavy, bro. That's good. Yeah, I love it. That's why I love doing this, man. Look, I walk in. I'm gonna get vulnerable here for a second. I come into these episodes, and my wife and another good friend of mine, Matt, will tell you, like, I come into these episodes heavy sometimes, and I don't know why. Sometimes it's like I need a pick me up. It's like I don't know. I sometimes question if I'm the guy for this. And even in hosting these stories, God continues to show me that it's not about me. It's like it's not even about me. It's more about what he wants to do through the stories. He needs me to sit here and host it. He needs me to sit here and be attentive to what he's saying and respond, or say, oh yeah, that's good. Okay, what about this? But it's less about me. So the heaviness that I feel that sometimes makes me want to just be like, hey man, I don't feel like doing this today. It becomes like the richest moments of like just hearing how God is working in another man's story that says, wow, as I always say, he's in the neighborhood. He's in the neighborhood. Like he's consistently working in people's stories, even when other people feel like he's absent in mine. But sometimes we're missing those things, those key places of like, God's looking to he wants a relationship with you. He's not trying to just drop things on you. He wants you to come to him. He loves you. So why not come to him as if you would come to a person who loves you, regardless of what you've done? But I need you to come to me. I need you to talk to me. I need you to give me an opportunity to talk back. I need you to trust me. And so no, this has been good.
But I gotta shout you out though, because I will say, we talked a lot about my discipline, but I also really admire your discipline and how you handle things on a daily basis, your prayer life, the videos and content that you put out about meditation and meditating on the word and reading the word daily, and just, even what you just now talked about, where you have the days where you feel heavy and you may not want to do this, you question, am I the person? And all of a sudden, lo and behold, Moses is in front of me, and you're sitting there questioning it, but you have the discipline of what we talked about earlier in showing up.
Yeah. And
you continue to show up, and it seems like from what you've shared today, every time you show up, you get a wow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's very admirable. So thank you again for doing this and for having me on, but not just having me, but for sharing all of these stories that you share on a weekly basis. It's incredible, man.
Right. No, I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to God.
Yeah. Yeah. And being obedient, man. Yes. Big thing, being obedient when you think that God is crazy.
And you can just title this message, "Thank You for Showing Up."
If the title of this message is "Thank You for Showing Up," my guy gave it the title. Know that. I like it. Well, bro, thank you again for coming, man. I appreciate everybody that played a part in making this happen. You guys know who you are. Thank you again, Crystal. I appreciate everybody who just, sat with us today and enjoyed this message. You got a great man here. Great man of God, doing big things, being a light in an industry that needs more lights, needs more people who are inspiring people, who are living out a life and knowing that the gist of my life is sports. I do sports. I play football, but sometimes they need something bigger to look at. They need a light to give them direction themselves. So I appreciate what you're doing, bro. I appreciate what you're going to continue to do and the relationship we're going to have and all. And I'm going to work on, asking you for some things too.
I appreciate it, man. Please do. But I'll give you 5 no's just to get you through.
Bet. See, he's already messed it up for me. No, I'm not going to be reaching out. But I'm going to push through those nails.
That's called real friendship.
Yeah, it is. But hey, thank you guys for listening today, and we will catch you on the next episode. It's been a great one, but thank you again, brother, and I appreciate you all for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, you like and subscribe, and also listen to past episodes. We hope to bring you great future content as well. Please comment your thoughts on this episode, as well as leave any prayer requests below so that this community can pray alongside you. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at God's Glory and Israel Stories.
Brothers, we understand how the thoughts of even facing your own past and current story and the pain and hurt that come along with this is no easy task. But you're not alone, as you hear in these episodes. Nor has God forgotten you or left your side, as He's in it with you, fighting alongside you through the storms of life. He loves and has already forgiven you, no matter what you have done, and He wants a relationship with you. Your healing, freedom, and growth are important to God, and to us as well. Maybe you're considering giving up, or need someone to talk to. Here are a few resources that already exist that we hope can shine a light into that dark place you're in. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. If you need support but are not in crisis, consider reaching out to a warm line with individuals who would love to talk with you. Speaking to someone on these calls is typically free and confidential, and run by people who understand what it's like to struggle in life. Find a local number by going to warmline.org.